Hi everybody, I have just made myself a lovely steaming hot cup of tea. I know it says coffee on my mug, but inside is a lovely hot, delicious cup of tea. I love drinking tea. And when I made my cup of tea a minute ago, I had to use my kettle. And that isn't my kettle, that's just a picture of a kettle. But my kettle runs on electricity, and whilst I was waiting for my kettle to boil, oh, I've got to have another sip. Do you mind? Oh, it's delicious. When I was waiting for my kettle to boil, I was thinking, how does the electricity get into my kettle and so I can have my lovely cup of tea? How does that work? Is it magic? Is it, I don't know, well, I did some research and I am going to explain to you now how the electricity is made and how it gets into my house so I can make my lovely cup of tea. And I was also thinking that actually I use electricity all the time. Every single day I use electricity, and I'm using electricity now on my laptop to make this lesson for you. And you are using electricity to listen to this lesson. So I do make lots of food and drinks and cups of tea using electricity, but there are also lots of other ways that I use electricity in my life. I like to watch the telly every now and then. And Mr. Thompson, he sometimes likes to play games on his games console. And I have an iPad, and that uses electricity too. So there are lots of things in my life that I use electricity for, and I'm sure it's the same for you. Even outside of our homes, there are lots of things that are powered by electricity. So we have street lights so that we can see when it's dark, and they haven't always used electricity, but they do now. We also have things like CCTV, closed circuit television, and that helps to keep us safe, and it's powered by electricity. Even some cars now run on electricity, and things that we use every day like escalators and lifts and all of that sort of thing. So how does this actually work? I am going to explain to you today how I get electricity from my power station. And at the top there, you can see a picture of a power station, which is quite close to my house. And that is where I get my electricity from. And I'm going to explain to you how it gets all the way from the power station into my house and into my kettle so that I can make a lovely cup of tea. And I'm going to explain to you how it does that in 6 simple steps. So your job today is to write down the 6 steps that it takes for Mrs. Thompson to get her cup of tea. Are you ready? Let's go. So, the first thing that you need to make electricity is fuel. Fuel. And fuel has a funny spelling. It looks like it should have a y in it, but it doesn't. The spelling of fuel is above my head. And there are lots of different fuels that we can use to make electricity. And some are not so good for the environment. Fossil fuels are things like gas and coal and oil. And they are less popular now than they used to be, which is good because they're not great for the environment. We can also use wind to help us produce electricity. And we can use solar energy, that's energy from the sun, and water, hydroelectricity. So we use the energy from the movement of water. But today I am going to tell you about how my local power station works. So it starts with burning fuel. There's lots of different types of fuel. And the fuel gets burned with fire, and that produces heat. So if I were to put a candle on to make my house smell nice, it would produce some heat energy. It would produce energy from the burning flame. So this is quite similar, But there's loads and loads and loads of fire in the furnace. The furnace is the big chamber where they burn all of the fuel in the power station, and it produces lots and lots of heat energy. And you can see a picture there of a furnace in a power station. The place where they burn the fuel is called a furnace. Okay, starts with an F, just like fire, so you can remember that word. So the fuel is burned in a furnace, and the furnace produces all of this heat energy. Okay, then the heat energy, the hot air, is passed over water, and when it goes over the water, it cools a little bit and produces steam. And you can see steam here. It looks like smoke, but steam is actually water particles, little water particles that have heated up and they've become a gas. Okay, so you have fuel, which is burned in a furnace, and that makes heat energy. Then it goes into the boiler, and that produces steam. Step 3 is a funny thing called a turbine, and a turbine is something that spins around a bit like a fan. Okay, and it spins around and it makes lots and lots and lots of noise. Okay, and that is where your energy comes from, because there are different types of energy. Okay, the energy that we have here, up here from the furnace, is heat energy. We call heat energy thermal energy. So anything with the therm in it is to do with heat. So the heat energy is thermal energy. And what our turbine does, our spinny thing, the turbine takes our heat energy and it turns it into another kind of energy, which is called kinetic energy. Okay, it's called kinetic energy. Kinetic is a fancy word for movement. So we have heat energy and it turns into kinetic energy. And that is because of the turbine. Okay, so we'll go through it again. We have a furnace which burns fuel, and that produces heat energy. And the heat energy goes into the boiler, which makes steam. And the steam turns the turbine. The turbine. Turbine sounds like turn, and it spins or turns. So that's how you can remember that. So the turbine takes our heat energy and turns it into movement energy. Okay. And then it sends it to another little gadget inside our power station called a generator. And a generator takes our movement energy, our kinetic energy, and turns it into electrical energy. So that's what happens inside the power station. Okay, we have heat energy from the furnace, which becomes steam, and the steam turns the turbine, and the turbine creates movement energy, and the movement energy goes into the generator, and the generator makes electrical energy. Okay, now when it gets outside of the power station, it changes a little bit. So you have probably seen things like this near your house. These are called power lines, and they tend to get a little bit smaller like this when they get closer to your house. But near the power station, they look a little bit like this. And they come out of the power station and they spread all across the fields and to all the houses and the shops and the businesses where the electricity is needed. So I've got some power lines like this, not too close to my house, but just up the road. Near my house, they are a lot smaller. This is not my house, but it looks, can you see the power lines here? The power lines look like the power lines near my house. And then the electricity comes all the way along the wires here, goes down into the ground, and then it goes under the ground and up into the house. Now, this is a picture of some wires behind a wall. Usually in our houses, we don't see wires hanging out everywhere. That's because they are hidden behind the walls, because they don't look ever so pretty. So we put nice wallpaper and paint over the top to cover it up. But they come into our house from the pylons, from the power lines, and then they go under the ground, into our house, behind the walls, and finally they come out of the walls at a plug socket, and that is where I plug my kettle in. Okay, and when I plug my kettle in, the electrical energy goes into my kettle and boils my kettle so that my water is nice and hot, because my water has got thermal energy. So the electrical energy turns back into thermal energy. So I have got my nice hot cup of tea. Delicious. Okay, so I'm going to go through that one more time, but I've got some little pictures to help me. Okay, so this is the bit in the power station where the electricity is made. So the water comes in and is burned in the furnace, and then steam is created in the boiler, and the boiler steam turns the turbine, and the turbine turns the spinning movement into electricity. And sometimes you will have things called transformers, and transformers are there to help us with our safety so that there isn't a big surge of electricity, because that can be dangerous. So the electricity is made in the power station, and then it comes across the pylons, across the power lines. We sometimes call them cables. And then there might be another transformer just for safety, and then it sends it out to all the local buildings. Okay, and then it goes under the ground into my house, and I end up with my lovely hot cup of tea. Delightful. So today you are going to take some notes for me on the different steps of how electricity gets into your home. Okay, so you can pause and go back and watch the video again. You don't need to write pages and pages and pages. You might just write step 1, step 2, step 3. Okay, and tomorrow I am going to explain for you what you need to do with all your notes. So once you've written your notes, you're going to keep them nice and safe. And tomorrow you're going to turn them into a fun project, and I will explain everything about that tomorrow. Okay, so feel free to pause, rewind, go back as many times as you like, and tomorrow I will explain what you are going to do with all that information. Have a wonderful day, make amazing choices, and keep working hard. I am so proud of you. I'll see you soon. Bye.